Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of the OM System Ask Me Anything sessions. You may have noticed that I am not Claire Harvey-May. My name is David, and I am standing in for Claire as she's been traveling around all over the world recently and needs a bit of a break. So I'm going to host the session tonight. Tonight's session is a very, very important one because we're going to be talking all about Astro. So first of all, before I introduce our very special guest, I'm going to bring in our tech experts that are going to be helping us out today as well. So first of all, I think we have Mr. Mike Amiko. Mike, are you there?
We do. It's me. Hey.
How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing okay, David. Good to see you.
It's always good to see you, Mike. Always good to see you. Really nice to have you on here. And what I should probably say is before we carry on bringing people in is that you and I were talking earlier and saying that Astro is not one of my strong points at all, which is why we really kind of needed to have our experts coming in as well. But
right.
To support our experts, we're kind of coming at it like all three of us are going to support our major expert tonight, aren't we? So I think we should bring in our second tech expert, which is Tomas. Tomas, are you there?
Hi guys, yeah, sure. Hi David. Hi Mike. How are you?
Tomas,
How you doing?
great to see you as well. How are you?
Hey, great. Actually, it's actually funny you mentioned that you are not an expert on starry sky because I'm not neither, you know. Mike is not neither. So we still need someone who is really an expert on starry sky photography, right?
We really do. We're pulling all of our tech expert powers together to support this next guest. But I think without further ado, we'll probably bring him in. And if we could bring in Mr. Peter Baumgarten, are you there?
Hello, David.
Hello,
and Mike
sir.
and Tomas.
Hey, Peter.
Good to be here. That's a pretty heavy label that I seem to be wearing right now as the expert. You know,
we didn't want to do anything other than put all of the pressure on you tonight. That's basically how we want
thank you
to
for
do
that.
that.
This is ask me anything, but I can't guarantee that I have an answer for everything. So, but I will.
That's the beauty of these sessions. That is the beauty of these sessions. But we are definitely going to be leaning on you because I know that you've got some great images that you've taken in this area. So we're really pleased to have you here. And for me also, the first time that I've done a session with you at all. So this is a really great honor for me. It's really nice to be here with you.
I've seen you many times on YouTube, but this is the first time we share a screen together. So
we've kind of exchanged glances of videos, but it's really good to get to have you here. So we have all four of us, and we have the absolutely amazing Mishalla in the background doing all of the really hard work. There she is with the moon earrings. Let's see them.
Oh yes, I wore my moon earrings just to support you guys tonight in the comments section.
Cool.
I miss all my YouTube friends, but I'm going to go back to the quiet place.
Oh no. She's in the admin room now to do everything for us from behind the scenes. But we really appreciate it. So what we're going to do, obviously, Peter, this is the first Ask Me Anything that we've had a photographer like yourself on here. Normally, it's just us tech experts kind of rambling on and being really nerdy about stuff. Usually fronted by the very awesome Claire Harvey-May. Because Claire's not here doesn't mean it's going to be any less awesome. In fact, it's going to be even more awesome than ever because we've got tech plus photographers. So what we're going to do is we're going to go straight in and tackle some questions, I think, because that's what we're here to do, if everyone's happy for that. And I'm going to do what Claire normally does, and I'm going to try and offer these questions to each of you independently. And even though I think we've probably already said most of these are going to, sadly, we're going to be swaying them towards you, Peter, but we will try and get through the nerdy stuff between us. So one of the first questions that we have up here that came in earlier on that we grabbed, I'm going to pop it up on the screen here, is from Edward, and it's a multifaceted question. So I think we're going to break this one down into sections. Thomas, can we talk about the question that Edward's kind of broken up into really brief sections? AF Illuminator, tape AF Illuminator. I'm assuming that's like a should we, can we? Is there any need to?
I mean, obviously you can tape anything, just about anything, even the AF Illuminator, but obviously you can also turn it off in the menu, right? So, I mean, it's very easy. It can be turned on, it can be turned off. So just, if you don't want to use it, you know, turn it off every single time that you don't want to, that you don't need it.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best thing to do. I mean, I think obviously before we had the option to switch off AF assists, tape would be the way forward. Peter, are you taping your camera or are you switching it off?
I switch it off on the new OM1, but to be honest, when I was using the EM1X, I didn't even know that feature existed. So I just used some gaffer's tape and covered it up because that blinking orange light can be a real nuisance at night, especially if you've got multiple cameras going or you're shooting with other people.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's something that, and it's also not very kind of discreet if you're using it in low light situations in general, is it really? If that's kind of going off all the time. Peter, while we've got you on this one, Edward's also added a couple of other bits into the question here, which is asking whether or not there's a need for a test shot, and how are you controlling the kind of white balance in these kind of nighttime situations? I
think a test shot when you're shooting at night is critical. It seems to be less critical with the newer cameras, especially again the OM1. I don't take as many test shots, but prior to Starry Sky AF, I would absolutely take a test shot and then zoom in and do a little bit of pixel peeping on the LCD just to make sure that everything was in focus. When you're actually shooting at night, if you've never shot at night before, actually getting a good composition can take multiple shots because you can't necessarily clearly see everything that you want to have in the image right through the viewfinder or on the LCD. So taking a test shot is good. I don't think there's any need to take it in aperture priority, right? When you're shooting at night, you're shooting using manual mode. And so do everything in manual mode, but yeah, take a test shot, really look at that carefully before you then continue shooting for the rest of the evening.
Nice.
And as far as white balance goes, great question. Should I shoot in auto or incandescent? I think with our cameras, it's actually called tungsten. I'd say neither of those. I strictly use a custom white balance, and I typically set my custom white balance for 3800 Kelvin. You don't need to. If you're shooting in RAW, which is what I would recommend for shooting at night, not strictly JPEG. JPEG and RAW is fine, but you definitely want to have RAW going. You can always adjust those later in your post in Lightroom or in the Olympus app. But I set it at 3800 Kelvin, and for me, that gives it a nice sort of comfortable look to the image. If you stick to auto, I find the image is uncharacteristically warm. It's very orangey yellow, and I find that unappealing, even on the LCD. I know that I can change it. Plus, if you leave it that way, you might end up blowing out some of your red highlights. So
sure, yeah.
Stick with the custom white balance for 3800.
And I think you also raise
and that's very easy to do in the super control panel. Incredibly easy to do.
I think you also raise a really good point in saying that if you're shooting RAW, then you've got the ability to adjust that white balance afterwards anyway.
Yeah.
So people need to bear that in mind. So with that in mind as well, also I want to just kind of go over the last couple of points of Edward's question here. In terms of because I think the question that Edward's posed is looking at different types of astrophotography or different sections of what you would call night sky photography, whether it's moon or star trails or Milky Way and things like that. So I think really if we pull out the most important part of this, I'm going to take this kind of end section here where Edward's asking for advice on focus points for clarity with foreground and stars. Well, what are your thoughts on kind of where you would go with that?
So very rarely do I ever need to blend images because I have something in the foreground that I need to have sharp. Most of the time, and I can definitely show you a few images as we go along in today's presentation, very rarely do I have something in the foreground that's so close that I can't get it sharp when the cameras or the lens is set at infinity. If I use the Starry Sky AF, then not only is the sky nice and sharp, but anything past infinity for that lens is also sharp. And infinity for some of our lenses, like the wide angle lenses, like the 12mm or the 8mm fisheye, is only a meter or so away from the front lens element. So unless you've got something really, really close, you don't need to worry about that. Now, there are some cases where I do, and then again, looking at your image afterwards just to make sure that the foreground is sharp can help. And then you have to take a second shot and blend that later, blend that in post. But, for most of my images, if I'm on the shoreline and there's a lake and I want to get a reflection of the Milky Way and there's a trees on the far shore or something like that, I don't have to worry about that.
Brilliant stuff. That's really good advice. And I know there are some other sections in Edward's question, but I think we've got some stuff that we can cover later on as well. So thanks, Edward, for your question. And thanks, Peter, for some really great answers there. We'll pop that one down. And let's take a look. I think we're going to go with, this one's really good, actually. And I'm not sure who would be able to answer this one, but I'm going to ask Mike if you've got a great idea. Mike, do you know of any apps that are good for alerts on the Aurora? I mean,
the Aurora specifically, I know a great app to use overall is PhotoPills. That usually has some really good info in general for photography, for the moon, all that. The Aurora specifically, not sure, to be honest.
I think this is a tricky one because rather than it being an app, it's going to be such a regional forecast thing, isn't it?
Sure.
Peter, have you got any insight on that one?
There are apps that do give you alerts. They'll send you an alert. So the one app that I use on my phone is just called Aurora, and you can download that, and it's free. And then when I'm on my desktop or using, the internet, I use brain fart here. The SoftServe News website, and you can get apps through that as well, but that costs you money. Right. So that's how they make some money off of that. But SoftServe News is fantastic for giving you a clear image of what the Aurora map looks like. I actually have, if Mishalla can, maybe we'll jump into my presentation in just a second, Mishalla. Let me get to that Aurora section here. But go ahead, Mishalla, give me a share and let me know when I'm up, because I can't tell.
Okay, you're oops, sorry, that's my fault. I've taken you away. I'm going to remove you from that. There we go. Your presentation is up here, and it's on photographing the Aurora.
All right. So very briefly, so this is a map of an Aurora forecast, and this is not a particularly vibrant example of one. This is if it looked like this, I wouldn't go out shooting at all. You can see a white arrow indicating where I live, and I would probably be able to barely pick it out with the camera and a long exposure. For me to go out, I want to go out when it's like this. That's an Aurora storm. And if you subscribe to one of those apps like SoftServe News, and you can see the website address in the top left-hand corner there, that will actually send a notification to you. Now, was it yesterday or the day before? This is what it looked like. And it was absolutely spectacular. It was one of the strongest auroras we've had in quite some time. There was one on March 23rd that I was able to photograph, but when this one came out a couple of nights ago, the area I was in was completely socked with clouds, and we couldn't get anything. And so I don't know if that helps to answer Denise's question. Those are the only two that I use. But while I'm sort of talking about this, it's timely because we are heading towards the peak of this solar cycle, which peaks in 2025. We're right about where that green arrow is. And we can expect many, many more really good, strong coronal mass ejections that will, just light up our skies, both to the north and the south, with some really nice aurora, right? Cool. And so that's what we can expect to get, right? Just while I'm showing you this, here's a shot from the one March 23rd, wow. Which was probably the best, certainly the best that I've ever photographed. And it's very rare at my latitude. I live the mid latitudes where I could actually stare straight up in the sky and have them dancing overhead.
Very cool.
And that is
incredible.
Yeah, you could have seen the exact same thing a couple of nights ago if, unlike me, you had clear skies. So, but that's part and parcel of shooting at night, right? It's hit and miss often when it comes to atmospheric conditions.
Sure, I think, and you're right. It really kind of shows us that there is so much more to this. Weather forecasting, aurora alerts, and I suppose the wind can change and bring clouds in from different directions. So it is far more complex before you even start to think about switching the camera on. Right, yeah. But that's incredible, and so it's great images there, Peter. It's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
Wonderful explanation. Thank you so much. Hopefully that's good for Denise. I'm going to bring in one now, which is a bit of, we'll bring in a techie one. So that Mike and Thomas don't feel left out over here. I'm going to bring in this one. I'm going to pose this one to Thomas because Thomas actually has a camera hooked up, so we can probably have a little look at what this is. But the Sabine HD asks, "What does SOVF mean? Should you change it, and if so, how and where?" So Thomas.
Well, I mean, yes, this is actually a simulated optical viewfinder, which is something that I don't think you necessarily need to have for Starry Sky AF, because simulated optical viewfinder, what it does, it actually brings some kind of HDR type of photography into the viewfinder. And what is, let's say, a contradiction of using SOVF is basically it doesn't reflect the changes in the exposure, if the aperture, speed, and so on. So what is the biggest advantage of regular viewfinder is that you see what you are getting, right? So if you move the aperture, exposure to plus, to minus, you actually see it. While if you turn on the simulated optical viewfinder, it reminds you the old mirror, DSLR times where you actually were using optical viewfinder. So this is basically it. Yeah, I don't think you would be necessarily needing to use this for Starry Sky AF, really.
Unless you wanted to see your foreground a little bit, unless you wanted to see what you had in your composition, then you could utilize that. But I don't think you would.
Yes.
All right. I was hoping that at some point I could jump in and just talk about one really cool tool that the OM1 has that has, I hate to use the word game changer because we overuse that, but this has totally changed it. Give me a second to show you this. And it's just a menu item, but this changes everything for me. Okay, David or Mishalla.
Yeah, night vision. Okay.
If you're using the OM1, the one feature you definitely want to turn on is night vision.
Yeah.
When I discovered that and turned it on when I first started shooting with the OM1, oh my gosh, it just made composition so much easier. I don't have any images to show you of what the screen looks like, but even when you're shooting the Aurora, you can see it very clearly on your screen. You can see the entire Milky Way. You just can't do that without that turned on. And this kind of goes back to, I think it was Edward asked the question about, composition and that kind of thing and taking test shots. I don't need to take test shots really when I'm doing this because composition is so much easier. I can see everything very, very clearly. It's way better than my own vision. It's like wearing night vision goggles, really. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, but I think it's important also to say that unlike night vision, everything's not green. So
no, it's absolutely not green. No,
it's all in the colors that it should be.
Yeah, well, it's more black and whitish because, of course, there isn't a heck of a lot of color in a shorter exposure, but it really has made shooting at night so much easier and faster for making compositions. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the OM1 is the only camera that has that. Is it not?
It's the only one, but the other ones had a live view boost, which I guess would be somewhat similar. A little different. Okay. Yeah, but this one is the only one that has that. Yep.
Yeah, something what we used to have in OMD cameras, right? But this is much more powerful.
Yeah. Hence why we've put it in as night rather than boost. Excellent. Perfect stuff. Brilliant. Okay, so as we go through, there are so many. We're sitting on a lot of comments as well. So you please remember, if we don't get to all your comments, we're sorry. We'll some of us will try and come back in afterwards, and you can leave more comments in after the live chat closes down. You can put comments into the video as it goes forward. So let's have a little look at this. And I kind of feel, and I know we came in and we joked a little bit and said, kind of, Peter, this might end up being mostly you. And we are kind of almost heading in that direction because of the nature of the questions that are being asked. So I am desperately trying to find the nerd questions for Mike and Tomas and then find the really kind of gritty Astro stuff for you. But I'm going to bring this one in from Dave and hopefully Peter, this is one that we can kind of shed some light on as well. Dave's struggling with constructing landscape Astro shots, in particular, getting adequate illumination of the foreground. Do you have any tips for it?
Okay. Now, if you're trying to illuminate sort of your immediate foreground, then low-level lighting is the way to go. There was a time when I first started shooting Astro, which was 2014, The only option really for illuminating your foreground was your headlamp or a flashlight. But since then, LED lights have just become so much cheaper, so much better, and quite dimmable down to almost nothing. So that if you're illuminating your foreground and you want nice, constant, even light, using some type of LED dimmable light can be a very useful tool. So I'm actually being illuminated right now here by a Lume Cube, which is what I also can use at night. It can go down to 1%, and for some situations that works really well. There's another tool that I use that everybody has, and that's my phone. So on my phone, I have an app, a flashlight app. I'm just going to get it up and running here. So it's called Screen Flashlight. I know you can barely see that right there, but there's a screen flashlight. Oops, I hit the wrong button there. And it actually can turn my whole screen into a flashlight. So right now you just see the flashlight icon. And if I press that, it changes the entire screen into an LED panel. And I have the ability to dim that down to almost nothing. So that's quite dim. And you can see now the slider up at the top that allows me to get to fairly bright. And for 90% of what I shoot, if I need to illuminate the foreground, this is all I use. Now, if you are trying to illuminate things that are quite a distance away, and that's just not going to reach. And I've illuminated things up to 50 meters away with that LED light with no issues whatsoever. But if you're trying to brighten up, let's say mountains off in the distance, or, you know, hills that are way off, you know, across a lake or something like that, well, that light's not going to work. That's not going to cut it for you. You may have to take a couple of shots. You definitely want to expose for your starry sky, and there are limitations, because if you have a much longer exposure, you're going to get star trails that you don't want. So you may have to take two shots. You may have to expose for the sky in your first shot, right? The Milky Way or whatever it might be. And then take a second shot at a much longer exposure, but perhaps a lower ISO to eliminate some noise, and then blend those two together. So in that second longer exposure shot, the stars would have moved, but you're not going to include those in your composite anyway. So that's another technique that you can use. Now, there is another one that I use quite regularly, and that does involve a little bit more work, but the results for me are phenomenal, and that is stacking your images. So I try to keep my shooting as simple as possible. Other than my camera, you know, a couple of nice fast lenses and my tripod, and maybe some lighting stuff, I don't use anything else. I don't use trackers or a bat knob mask for focusing. I don't use anything other than the basic tools that I would use for landscape photography. And so I stack my images, which means taking a series of shots and then blending those in post. And so I've got a couple of slides to show you there again. Give me a second to get those up and running here. All right, so if Mishalla can show that screen, I've been stacking for a few years now, and the results are phenomenal. So here is a shot that I took earlier this year, maybe about a month ago, when we still had ice on the lake here, and I was out shooting this old shed with the Milky Way in the background. And that is the shot, essentially the raw image. I did have to convert it to a JPEG for this, but that's basically it. And I was using my 7-14, which is not the fastest lens in our arsenal. So I was shooting at ISO 6400. Now, if I take that shot and then just, you know, try to process it a bit in Lightroom and bring it up, you can see that, hopefully you can already see that it's pretty noisy. And if I zoom in a little bit more to just one section, you can see at 6400, there's a fair amount of noise. By stacking that, right, this is the stack. So what I do is I set the camera to take 10 or 20 shots all at once, back to back, with no noise reduction on or anything like that. And then I take those and I export them into a piece of software called Starry Landscape Stacker. And the noise is reduced significantly. And if we do a side-by-side comparison, so the one on the left is the single raw image, and the one on the right is the stacked shot. And there's a huge difference. But the reason why I bring this up for, you know, illuminating your foreground is by stacking, you also get much better dynamic range. You can pull details out of your foreground, even more distant objects that didn't have any kind of artificial light on them. You can pull out some really incredible details with that. This does, of course, increase the time. So instead of a 15-second exposure, now I've, multiplying that by 10 or 20 times. And so now I'm shooting the same scene for several minutes, but the end result is incredible. And there are 2 programs that I'm aware of, well, 3 really, that you can use for this stacking. Starry Landscape Stacker is the one that's available for the Mac, and it's really good. I think it's about $40 US. For Windows machines, there's Sequitur, and that is free. I've never used it. My understanding, it's not quite as powerful or intuitive. You can actually do this in Photoshop all on your own, and there are tutorials out there. And I tried them, but it was a pain in the butt. It was worth the $40 to have it do it all for you. And what it does is it masks the sky and then realigns all the stars. Because, of course, during that shooting of 10 or 20 shots, the stars are moving. And so it realigns all the stars, yet keeps the foreground stationary, blends those all together. And it's phenomenal at just how well you can pull details out and reduce the noise.
This is a really good example of why you would want to use that technique as well, Peter. So, and I think it kind of also brings in that we've had someone else ask another question in here that I'll pop up, which is from Andy. We was talking about buying Starry Landscape Stacker, and you've pretty much just answered the question. It's got an OM5, but it's not about whether the camera can handle it. It's a complete technique, isn't it? Really, using that as a post-production method. The
OM1, when it first came out, I noticed significant improvements in noise handling when I was shooting at 3200 or 6400, significantly better than previous generation, OM system cameras. But, this just takes it to the next level. And so to answer that question, should you buy it? I think it's, if you're truly interested in developing better Astro shots, I think it's worth the investment. I truly do.
It definitely sounds, and also looks like you would advocate it very well.
Yeah. The one thing that I would not recommend, and I just sort of glanced at the comments and I saw someone talk about, noise reduction. If you want to leave your noise reduction on in your camera, that's fine. No problem there whatsoever. But I have tried some of the other noise reduction software that's out there, like Topaz Denoise. My preference is actually On1's No Noise. I haven't tried the new Lightroom version that has noise reduction built in, but I have not been pleased at all with the way they deal with noise in Astro shots, because what they view the stars as noise. Yeah. And then they eliminate the details in the stars in the Milky Way. And
interesting.
The images, the sky looks really muddy. Based on, a few times that I've done it, and maybe things are improving and there's other software out there that may be better, but I've used those 2, not been impressed with that.
So that's
honestly,
the AI
Peter,
section of
the
that,
latest
though,
version.
really?
The latest version of the Lightroom actually is amazing. I don't know how about stars, but as for the noise, I would even compare it to the noise, maybe even better, Topaz Labs and all
okay. And like I said, it's just come out. I haven't had the time to download it.
Yeah, it's very new.
And I will try that just to see how it works. But the one thing that a noise program can't do, or a denoising program can't do, is improve your dynamic range. And that's what stacking can do.
Yeah, so this is what we sort of see some of our photographers that do Astro talking about quite a lot, particularly the deep space stuff. It's bringing out the colors, it's bringing out that dynamic range, it's bringing out all that availability and reducing the noise. And I think it is really important to make that difference when talking about denoise software, is that if you're denoising a bird image, it's completely different to denoising a star full of skies, because the AI is looking at this in different ways. So where one software may be absolutely excellent in one area, it may not fare very well in the other. And I think, valid point, stars are pretty unique in that area. So, but that's some
David,
great advice.
Yeah, may I one thing? To the stuff when we are just talking, Peter have been perfectly describing the way how to do the, let's say, the foreground with the starry sky. I just found one image. It's from, let's say, yet another starry sky photographer. And it's this one, which basically is just about the same. It's beautiful starry sky. Obviously, if it was longer exposure, you would have the starry stars moving on the sky. But there is very nicely lit foreground, which obviously is very far from the photographer. But in this case, this is, let's say, another way of doing the same thing as Peter was just describing. But this way is you need to be there on spot for at least 5, 6, 7 hours because you put the tripod on, you take a wonderful shot of the rocks, which are illuminated by, let's say, sunset. And then you wait another few hours until it actually gets really dark and you start shooting the second image, which will be the starry sky. So this is possible. And this is even in high-res shot mode. So you can actually shoot it in high-res. So it's high resolution.
So Tomas, this is what we call a time blend. And I do that as well. And you're right. It's a huge time commitment because you're probably talking at least 3 to 4 hours. And then you have to blend those images together. But they do create a very unique look. And I can show those as well. But we're probably a little pressed for time, but time blending is
we're good. We're good for time. We're good for time, Peter. If you want to bring them up, let's put like
they're in another slideshow.
Sure. So okay, I'll tell you what. I'll let you look for that one. I'm gonna pose another question here for Mike. So Mike, the question. Well, first of all, we're gonna bring this one up which is back from Edward, because I think we can all say the answer to this one. Would it make sense to trade in for an OM1? If you've got an EM1 Mark III, of course,
absolutely.
Yeah, OM1's the best camera I've shot. And that's honestly, it's the best camera I've ever shot. It's absolutely fantastic.
And it's progressive, isn't it, Mike? That's the thing, is that we're looking at EM1 Mark II and EM1 Mark III, which are phenomenally good cameras.
Completely different. Yeah.
Completely different. It's huge.
It's amazing.
All OMDs are brilliant, but OM1 is like a totally new piece of hardware. You have to realize
next level, isn't it? Yeah.
There's the stacked sensor.
Absolutely.
New display, new viewfinder, new everything. All the single piece of hardware is totally new.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're not biased at all. So
no, not at all. No.
Okay, Peter, shall we hand over to you? And if Mishalla could be so kind as to bring your screen up, that would be fantastic.
All right. So I just pulled this out of another presentation that I've done. So yeah, time blending is a great technique, and I don't do it a lot, but I certainly have done it. And so basically what you do is you find a spot, you set up your tripod, and you don't move. And so here's the very first time blend that I ever created. I set the tripod up on the shore of this little lake here. This was about 2 a.m. or something like that. There we go, 2 a.m. on April 20th. This was a couple of years ago, not just past April 20th. And then here's a shot from 4:07 in the morning. And you can see we're now into the blue hour and the Milky Way is exiting the screen. And then this is just before the sun is rising. And during that whole process, the camera doesn't move. Now, those first 2 shots, I just use my typical Astro settings. This one now, the sky is getting so bright that, shooting at ISO 3200 or something like that wasn't required. And so I started shooting sort of my typical landscape sunrise settings. But then I take those images and I blend them together something like this. Because it's the fisheye lens, it's got a little bit of distortion, a little bit of curvature there. Straighten it out, add a bit of post-processing, and this is kind of the end result. And you do this in post. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but by using layers and layer masking, you can then, reveal portions of the images from down below, and then, blend those together and do whatever else you want to do with that. And, since that first time a couple of years ago, I've gone out many other times. Here's one very similar. And of course, this was absolutely impossible to see. You cannot see the Milky Way and the sun rising at the same time, but with time blending, you can, right? Just another example of that. Right.
This is a phenomenal technique, Peter, by the way. I have to say these images are absolutely astounding.
Very, very cool. Yeah.
Thank you. Here's one that involved 4 shots, 3 for the foreground sky, and then 1 with live composite, because of course we're getting those traffic trails. And if you live where I live at about 2 or 3 in the morning, you can't guarantee that anybody's going to be driving by. So I actually had to do the driving myself. That's actually
leave the camera behind.
I left the camera behind, got in my vehicle, drove that S curve, and came back again. Right? Here's just a few other ones using this technique. That's myself in that image. Now, here's an example of one that didn't require several hours. This was about 20 minutes. I got out just at the end of official night, just before sort of, twilight is beginning. And I shot the sky, and then I just waited another 20 minutes and shot the foreground with just enough of the sky, lightening up that I could get that interesting boardwalk to show off some of its details without having to use artificial light. Here's just another one. Again, this was about 20-minute wait. So you don't necessarily have to use hours of shooting. And then this one, I went out at night during the blue hour. I shot the daisies, and then waited until it got dark and shot the Milky Way. So it's
got these really fantastical kind of sci-fi fairy tale feel to them, haven't they? It's such a beautiful way to shoot. These are great.
Absolutely, yeah. They're not realistic because, of course, you cannot see that at that time in one single image. But
right,
I'm not a documentary photographer. I try to be an artist when it comes to this kind of stuff.
And art they are as well. I'm amazed by it. They're really, really awesome. Thank you for sharing those with us, and obviously the technique as well, which I'm sure loads of people are going to have tons more questions on.
Yeah, it's a fun technique, right? If you're reasonably comfortable with layer masking and you've got the time, it's a great technique to try.
Yeah, I will say, if anybody can catch one of Peter's classes and you want to see how to really get detailed into some of this stuff, he's fantastic.
Thanks.
Yeah.
There we go, Peter. You're going to be very, very busy as of the next 10 minutes for months, which is fantastic. Okay, I'm going to throw some techies out now for Mike and Thomas. Mike, for Liz,
sure.
Can you give any advice on the best way to set infinity on
lenses? Yeah, Mark III. I mean, there's a couple ways. One thing, if you're shooting the stars, you can always use Starry Sky. I mean, that's going to get you out there. Another way to set your infinity, if you want to focus on, say, if we're talking stars, is to use focus peaking, manually focus. Get out there and highlight those stars. I like to use red. And then you can also use that clutch mechanism. You can focus on infinity by using that as well. Some of your markings on the lens will help. You have your infinity set on the lens. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. But that said, again, if you're focusing on the stars, that Starry Sky really does work very well if you have that Mark III.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, maybe you can show it on the camera. I mean, I don't have one Mark III, but I've got OM1 here attached to the
very similar.
Yeah, which is very similar basically. So what you want to do is, originally, you press OK button, then basically you switch from this CAF or CAF mode, which you have there. You switch it to Starry Sky, which is this one. So this is the mode for Starry Sky F. And then if you want to set it into detail, then you press the menu button. And in this AF, you go to the first tab and you go to the third line, which is Starry Sky AF setting. And in there, you can actually choose two modes. One of them is speed, which can also somehow be used in handheld shooting, but then you are shooting only, let's say, maybe 10-15 seconds exposure, which you could with wide angle lenses, fisheye lenses, with this, let's say, extremely powerful stabilization system, which is built in the camera. But obviously, for stars, I would definitely recommend to use the tripod. And in that case, you would use the accuracy mode, which basically takes a little bit more time. So it can take quite a couple of seconds before it focuses. But you are like 100% sure that the camera is perfectly focusing on the stars. And then if you go back, you can just select, if you want to use the regular release button, shutter button, or the AF button, AF1 button, which is on the back. And the way they behave, basically. If you are using this shutter button or AF1 button, which is on the back for your thumb, then you need to hold it, press it and hold it. So obviously, let's say the default setting, which is AF1 start stop, is much easier for you to use. You just press it, the camera basically starts focusing. And then if you want to end it, then you press it again. So you don't need to hold it all the time. So basically, this is the setting. And obviously, you can also choose turn on or off the release priority. But basically, what you want to choose is the accuracy mode once you are using the tripod.
Yeah. And I think it's also worth pointing out as well, in reference to those buttons that activate Starry Sky, that you may want to choose to have the focusing function on that back button, because front button release only is very useful when you've already focused. Would you agree, Peter?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And once you've set it, the wonderful thing about Starry Sky is once you've set it, you can shoot for hours and never have to press it again. Turn your camera off and turn it back on again. Probably good idea to do it then, or if you switch lenses. But if you're shooting with the same lens, I've shot with for hours and hours and never had to, refocus with by using Starry Sky AF. It's been a great tool to eliminate focusing frustration.
Excellent.
That's awesome.
Good.
And
Good
also
to know as well that
hours.
Sorry,
Sorry.
Thomas,
I was just getting to Peter's comment about shooting for hours and hours. Basically, with OM1, you don't have to worry that much about the battery because the battery lasts like almost forever. And there's the second point, and that is you can actually connect it to let's say via a USB cable to a remote power bank and power it from the power bank like endlessly. Basically.
Yep.
Exactly.
Always have those power banks with you and the whole power charge and shoot combined thing with OM1 is the groundbreaking stuff, really, isn't it? Because it just means that previously you would be able to charge camera switched off, charge only, but now we can just do everything and just have it sort of tucked away. And if you've got a slightly shady power bank and it's a little bit cold out there, that'll keep your hands warm as well. So there's all sorts of bonuses to that. Yeah. Brilliant stuff. Great answers all round, guys. I have to say as well, our session is flying away. We're already sort of almost 3/4 of the way through. So let me see if we can bring in, fantastic. I've got to bring this up. Our very own PJ has come in and has got a nice question for Peter. PJ, hey, we know that you were still working until very not long ago. So thanks for coming in and watching us and offering this question to Peter. So Peter, do you see a difference between the sensor in an OM1 and the EM1, 2, 3, and X in sensitivity for hydrogen light from the sky?
The OM1 all around has got much improved sensitivity. I wouldn't necessarily say that I've noticed a difference specifically for hydrogen light though. So, but when I was lucky enough to get the OM1 early, when it, before it was released to the public, and I could not believe the difference in noise reduction, sensitivity, image quality overall for everything, but especially for Astro, because I do a fair amount of that. And at that point, I was doing some side-by-side shooting with the EM1 Mark III, which was the immediate precursor, and the EM1X. So I haven't really done a lot with hydrogen light and noticing that, so I'm not giving you the best answer for that, but
no, but it's a fair answer, and that's what we're here to get. So it's a great question from PG, but also a very fair answer from you if you've not seen that either. It's quite specific, as well. But PJ, thanks very much. You can put your feet up for the rest of the evening. We're giving you permission to relax and open a beer and just do nothing for the rest of the night. Thanks very much, PJ. Okay, so. Just a real quick recap as well. Sonia needs a reminder of the app that turns your screen into a flashlight. What was it called, Peter?
It's just called Screen Flashlight. Now,
Screen Flashlight.
That's all it's called. Whether you use Android or iPhones, it doesn't matter what the app is. Make sure that it can do two things. Number one, that it can dim down to almost nothing, because there are times where you want very little light to illuminate your foreground. And the other thing that would be really nice is if it can change colors. So the one that I showed you, I just showed you the white light, but I can, choose from millions of colors because it's got the various sliders on it. Right? It's not color balanced, but it's good enough that if I want to add a warmer tone to the foreground, I can do that, or a cooler tone. That would be those are the only two things that you have to look for, and there's tons of them out there. I think they're almost all free.
Good. So in the tool bag, the power banks and the flashlight, the screen flashlight. Yeah, excellent stuff. Thank you so much. Okay, Mike.
Yeah.
What do you think about recommending lenses? Great Plains Visual Productions wants to know 825 wider. What would you say? Your personal opinion?
So 8 to 25, I wouldn't look at only because it's an f4. So one thing with the night sky is you definitely want the brightest lenses that we have. So 7 to 14, your 17 1.2 would be okay. That's I don't want to say it's about as narrow as I would get, because some people do shoot with like a 40 to 150. It really depends on you, but most people want wide angle. So they're looking at like the 12 to 40 2.8, the 7 to 14 2.8, the 17 1.2, the 8mm fisheye. The 1.8 is probably Peter's favorite.
It is. You got it.
That's a fantastic lens. The 12mm f2.
Right, yeah.
That's another one, the 12mm f2. So any of those bright lenses are the ones you want to get. You want to get as much light into that camera as you can get.
You know, that 12mm f2 gets sometimes lost, doesn't it? It gets forgotten in the the grand scheme of things, but it's got such a it really does have a home in this area of photography.
The size and the everything. Yeah. Sorry, Peter.
Right.
I never go anywhere at night without that lens. That the 12-2 and the 8mm 1.8 are my two most popular lenses to shoot with. I carry the 17 1.2, the 20 1.4 is also a really good lens. If you like to really show the details of the Milky Way, that's a nice lens too. And then the 7 to 14, although by the time you get to 2.8, it's starting to get a little on the slower side. It's fine, but you know, anything that's 1.8 or faster is ideal.
Yeah, definitely.
Good stuff, guys. Good stuff. Thank you so much.
David, there was one
yeah.
question. I know that you're the guy that's in charge of the questions, but there was one that went by that I really think we should address, because I get it all the time.
Absolutely.
And that is, Moises had the question about high res mode and shooting.
Yes. So is this the one with the tracker?
Well, because it kind of built. So if you go to my screen, I'll tell you how I have used high res mode to get images. And I've considered writing an article for the Learn Center, and I may still do that. But using the high res mode is one of those questions I get all the time. And the answer is you can use it, but sparingly. There are certain situations where it will not work. But I'll give you a situation where it will. So
do you need your screen up?
Yeah. There you go.
You got it? All right. So here is an image shot using the tripod high res mode. That's 80 megapixels. It's like 10,000 pixels on the long side, 10,000 something. And you can clearly see that the foreground is sharp, but the stars have moved over the duration. Because again, with high res mode, you've got 8 images. This was set at 15 seconds. And so that's 8 15-second exposures, right? So that's what the foreground looks like if you use tripod high res. But if you switch it to handheld high res, this is what you get. And so now I'm still on the tripod, even though it's in handheld mode, I still have it locked, right? Still 15-second exposures, time is 8. And now you can see that the Milky Way is nice and sharp. The advantage to using this handheld is that it brings out some nice details in the Milky Way that you might not get otherwise. The problem, of course, now is the foreground isn't sharp, because after the 8 images have been shot, it tries to realign them because it's assuming that there's been some movement. It notices the movement in the stars and tries to realign that, but in the process, it's now blurred the foreground. But that gives me 2 shots. I have the tripod one with the foreground nice and sharp, and now I've got the handheld shot with the stars sharp. Those 2 images are different sizes. One's 80 megapixels, one's 50 megapixels, but I can now blend those together in post and get a high res image that has some great detail in it. And it does sort of behave as a tracker does. It works really, really well in situations like this composition, where my foreground is pretty minimal and, you know, basically a fairly plain, uniform foreground at the bottom, you know, fifth of the image. Where it really struggles is if you have something projecting into your sky. So I've tried this with trees, you know, like I've got a tree in the foreground that takes up a large chunk of the sky, and then the Milky Way's in the background. Handheld high res doesn't know what to do with that. And so it will try to realign parts of the image and other parts won't be, and it kind of turns it into a bit of a mess. I couldn't find any examples as I as I was prepping for this, sort of, it was a last minute thing. Oh yeah, I've got to find some handheld high res stuff to show. And I couldn't find one that messed it up, but it works really well for simple.
That's a good thing though. We couldn't find one that messed it up.
But it works really. So if I just want a really nice detail shot of the sky, handheld high res is awesome. And this is a shot with a 20mm lens. So I've got, a fairly large core of the Milky Way. I can see that horse, right? I can see the colors in the Milky Way, all the stars, right? So it's great for something like that. It doesn't work as well if there are things projecting into your sky.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation of it, Peter. Thank you. And some nice visuals to go along with that. Again, stunning, absolutely stunning. Thank you. I'm good. We are dramatically running out of time. Literally, Mishalla just poked me with a sharp stick and said, "Oh, look out! We've got kind of 10 minutes left, so we want to really kind of make these last few questions really count." So, very quickly, I want to go to Thomas, and Thomas Belinda's question is: will Starry Sky work with non-Olympus lenses? Or
Starry Sky with non-Olympus lenses. Well, Starry Sky is basically a focusing system. So basically, if you have a lens which is like a manual lens, like from Lenovo or others, basically it will not. I'm not sure, actually, honestly, about Panasonic. It should be working with Panasonic lenses because they are AF and they are communicating with our bodies. So it should be working as well. Yeah.
I agree. I haven't tried it, but I think that it shouldn't be a problem because it should be an on-chip part of the process. So
yeah, exactly. So any one of you who's got Panasonic lens, please try on tonight. And
sorry, guys.
Let us know. Let us know.
I just lost half my studio here.
Well, I thought you might have had a connection issue there, Mike. We were quietly waiting to see if you would just jump back in.
No, okay, just knock something down.
Oh, you had to go to the bathroom, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's not fair. The host can't go.
I lost my iPad and everything else went with it.
So. Oh no! Wow.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
You did the right thing by shutting down for a second. Okay, so then the next thing I want to just sort of focus on is another quick question. We'll try and make these fairly quick, these ones, just because we are running out of time, but I want to try and get as many answers through as possible. Great Plains Visual Productions has brought up a question saying, can't we just use in-camera stacking with the OM1 to get the same results? I'm going to put Mike on the spot because I think, Mike, obviously you're going to be able to answer the differences here.
Yeah, so in-camera stacking is a little bit different. So, it's not going to really work the same when it comes to Starry Sky, I don't believe. You're looking at focusing sort of outward, towards the subject, or if you're using stacking, then inward and then outward. For landscape, that's fine. But I think with night sky, it's a little bit different. You're looking at longer exposure. You're looking at a lot of different techniques that it's just not the same as taking separate images and putting them together. In the image. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong,
isn't it, really? Because with our in-camera stacking, we're stacking for depth of field rather than for dynamic range, which is where the difference is.
Right. So you're better off shooting that foreground, let's say, kind of like Peter showed in a couple of those examples earlier, and then shooting that background as well, but maybe 2 shots or what have you. But yeah, not the typical, 8-image stacking or 15-image stacking.
The other thing to consider is that with the focus stacking, the built-in stacking, it requires the autofocus to be on. And I don't think it would work with Starry Sky AF, right?
That's true too, yeah,
absolutely.
You need to have a well-illuminated foreground for it to grab a focus on something.
You do. It is definitely it's a different aspect of photography that those functions are for. So yeah. Great stuff, guys. Brilliant. Okay, so let's do a quick one. Peter, any tips for shooting stars?
Shoot lots. There's the tip.
Just keep shooting. Pro capture, maybe.
No, truly, keep shooting. So definitely. So basically, a shooting star is a meteor. Your best chance of success is to go out during a meteor shower, like the Lyrids that we just had in April, the Geminids in December, the Perseids in August. Most people are most comfortable shooting the Perseids, which peak August 12th, because for most parts of the world, it is the warmest and The Geminids is in mid-December, and that's not necessarily the most comfortable. And then figure out exactly where they're coming from, which part of the sky they're coming from. I wrote an article in the Learn Center that it's got information on that. Plus, you can also find that kind of stuff online. And then basically, it's just keep shooting. The wider your field of view, a wider angle lens is going to give you more chance of capturing a meteor. Those images that you see online where there's, a dozen or more meteor strikes in one single shot, those are composites. There's no way that you would get, 10, 15 meteors in a 15 or 20 second exposure. That's just, if that's happening, I think we all better run for cover.
It's a warning sign, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. But other than that, my camera settings are pretty much the same, except that I will enter into the time-lapse mode. And so I'll set it for time-lapse. I'll set the camera up, and I'll shoot 100 shots or 500 shots. Sometimes I'll shoot all night, and I'll go to bed. I literally have done this many times where I'll set the camera up in a remote area where I know no one will be, and then I'll go home and I'll go back in the morning and pick up the camera, and it will have shot all night long. And amongst the 800 or 900 shots, I may find 40 or 50 that had a meteor strike in them. And then I can use those however I'd like. I can create composites out of them, or maybe one is, a particularly brilliant meteor strike. But yeah, so when I say shoot lots, that's what I mean. I don't mean standing there all night long pressing the shutter release. That gets pretty boring.
It's really good advice, though, because a lot of people would think if you have to go out there and take a lot of shots, you've got to be with it, know. But if you set the intervalometer, the time-lapse shooting to just go, and then obviously you're in a safe enough location to walk away, leave your camera and go and get some Zeds, then that's a perfect way to do it, Peter. Yeah, fantastic stuff. Great stuff. Well, we're going to take one more because we're sort of literally running up to the end of our session here, and we are so grateful, Peter, for all of your excellent advice today, which we have pretty much just literally gone, let's just send it to you.
It's been very, very fun.
The greatest answers. Where with the tech experts just feeling a little bit uncomfortable about the subject matter, but we're glad to have you. So the one that I'm going to bring in now is one that I think people ask quite a lot, and I think there's more to this than just the simple kind of answer. But Min Engine Man asks, what is the best focus point for the moon shots? Is it on the edge? Is it a crater? Is it a center? Where are you going to go with that one, Peter?
I typically focus on the edge. So depending on how I'm viewing it. So I've shot it with the 150 to 400, right? With the teleconverter on. So, that's effective 1000 millimeter lens that I'm shooting with. I can focus on a crater and be just fine, and it comes out sharp. If I'm shooting with, the 150 to, the 40 to 150, which I've done on occasion, then I'm more likely to just grab the edge of the moon, right? We're running out of time, I know, but moon photography is a whole other subject all on its own, right? Trying to get the right exposure. I think Edward kind of asked this at the beginning. There are a couple of ways of getting the right exposure. One is to use, it's in my slideshow because I never use this technique. I just have to very quickly look at it. Right, spot metering, because I never use it.
Spot meter.
So you can use the spot meter, and it will give you a really accurate exposure as long as the moon is in the center of your frame. What I do, though, is I just use exposure compensation. And usually with my moon shots, I don't even switch to manual. I'm still shooting in aperture priority, and I'll just dial down the exposure compensation all the way down to perhaps -5. Until I like the way it looks. One of the great things about mirrorless is, basically what you see is what you get. And when I like the look through the viewfinder on the LCD, that's the exposure that I go for. So I treat my moon photography quite different than anything else that I shoot at night. I also will use the multiple exposure. If I don't like where the moon is, I will grab the moon in one shot and move it somewhere else for another one.
One of the things I use, you guys, is the manual focus and autofocus. with the red focus peaking. They'll grab the edge of the moon and then just touch up and light that whole moon up red, so that I know that's in focus.
Absolutely. Maybe combine it with the magnify assist as well, so that you can really jump in there and really get a nice
F8 to F11 spot metering. Yep.
The other thing that people may not, sorry,
go ahead, Peter.
The other thing that people may not realize is that for most moon shots, you can hand hold it.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be attached to a tripod. Even at ISO 200, with a full moon in particular, you can easily, I think you're probably shooting at 1/1000th of a second or something like that. And even with a gibbous moon, half a moon, quarter moon, you're still getting fast enough shutter speeds at ISO 200 that you can handhold no problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
The only time I'm shooting the moon and I switch to a tripod is if it's an eclipse. Then I definitely switch. Once I get to sort of the blood red moon stage, then it's getting too dark to handhold.
Yeah.
And I think there is this misconception that that you need to shoot slower because you're shooting at night, but the moon is one big light source, isn't it really? And if that's what we're metering for, you can get those speeds nice and fast. Gentlemen, that hour has disappeared. It's absolutely gone like lightning, honestly. And I'm so grateful to all of you. I know that you guys, Thomas, Mike, you've been traveling loads recently, so you must be exhausted. Peter, your advice and images, as always, are fantastic. And I really appreciate that. Sorry if we didn't get through to all of the questions. We will do our best to go back in, put some comments on the video once it's not live, and we will do our very best to help out. But we are going to sadly have to close the session for tonight. So, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evenings or daytimes, obviously, as well. And I will catch up with you all soon. And everybody else, thank you so much for watching. We will see you on another Ask Me Anything episode very, very soon. But for now, take care and bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.